It is my honor to also now introduce Mike Termott. He is a 2024 Libertarian presidential candidate, an economist, a former police officer, and he's going to speak on a Gold New Deal, changing the relationship between us and our government. Thank you so much, Mike.
I am here because I believe that we have a huge opportunity in 2024. And I believe that for us to capitalize on that opportunity as a Libertarian Party and as individual Libertarians, whether in the party or not, to take advantage of that opportunity, we need to do certain things and recognize certain forces that are at work. I am in the race personally because I'm trying to push the party to run the process the way I think it should be run. We have an opportunity for a lot of bad reasons. I want to talk about what they are. The reason we have such a huge opportunity is because things aren't going well. And I believe that we need to rally around the idea of a fundamental change in the relationship between us and our government. I believe that we need a fundamental change between us and the state government, a fundamental change between us and the federal government, a change in the way our states relate to the federal government, and by the way, a huge change in the way our federal government relates to the rest of the world. Now, I call all of that together what we are proposing as the Gold New Deal. Now, you can go to our website, goldnewdeal.org. I know some of you are going to go to goldnewdeal.com. You're going to be sorely disappointed by what they're going to try to sell you there. But at goldnewdeal.org, we spell out a 12-point plan, lots of details, yada, 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 boring, libertarian bread and butter, a lot of it. A lot of it's pretty edgy, pretty aggressive, but it's libertarian bread and butter. But here's the flagship idea. And then I want to talk about why it's our flagship idea. The big idea here is, as you know, there is a movement afoot in the United States towards secession and national divorce. You've heard this conversation. It's big in the Libertarian Party. It's big now in the Republican Party, and just starting in the Democratic Party. I just moved from Florida earlier this year. In Florida, at the Libertarian Convention, we voted to secede. I want that to sink in for a minute. I had just moved out of the state. I was no longer allowed to vote, so I was just sitting there watching with my eyes wide open, right? We did not vote, I say we, they, as a party, they did not vote to say we have the right to secede. We already took that as an assumption. We voted to secede. It was a good idea, the vote said. That's pretty aggressive stuff. Now, before we all make fun of this idea, let me assert something. Everyone's thought about it. As much as you may say that's a dumb idea, don't tell me it hasn't crossed your mind already, right? Because as much as we think it's a political non-starter, it doesn't solve our problems, it sounds too radical, it makes it sound dopey, don't tell me it hasn't crossed your mind. Because it has. That's exactly right. All right, the big idea in the Gold New Deal is this. We believe we can head off that movement and leverage that movement by changing the relationship between states and the federal government through a constitutional option that gives states the right to opt out of federal supremacy going forward. You would have the right, as a state, to opt out going forward federal legislation that conflicts with your own, same thing with federal court orders and federal executive orders. And retrospectively, you could vote your way out of existing conflicts between state law and federal law. It's a radical idea, not as radical as secession. You would remain in the Union. Some might say you would remain in the Union basically for purposes of defense. Here's what we're going for. We want to end this direct relationship where states want to, right? We want to make this optional. Where states take the option, we want to end the direct relationship between individuals and the federal government that's all financial, right? When the federal government needs money, we believe they ought to go to the state instead of through the IRS to individuals. Change that relationship at its core. Anyone here been audited? I could tell by looking at you. Yeah, I know you were audited. Anybody else been audited? I have been audited. It's a very pleasant experience, wouldn't you say? You get very nice letters in the mail, and they're very thoughtful and they're very communicative. You call them on the phone, you have a good chat, You eventually see eye to eye, right? Then you come to some resolution, and that usually happens in a few days. All of which is completely 180 degrees opposite, right? It's a horrible experience. And why? Because you have no power in front of the federal government. You should be represented to your federal government by your state. The federal government wants money, it should come to Tallahassee for it, right? It should come to Annapolis for it. It should come to Springfield, Illinois for it. It shouldn't go directly to you. You can't stand up to the federal government when you have a disagreement. As another example, as much as you may feel bad about how quickly this country goes to war, and we do, right? There's very little that you can do about it. Our proposal is to require every military intervention to have a declaration of war, and for every declaration of war to require a vote of the states directly. Make it very, very difficult. Now, yesterday, that being the only other non-Spike related applause line, didn't get as many applause as "I will fight you in the hallway if you say something bad about Spike." By the way, I haven't gotten to why I had to say that, okay? So we're going to get there in a minute. Yes, we need a mechanism in place to slow down our government because the wheels are greased toward meeting the interests of the military-industrial complex. We recognize that. All we're talking about is how to restructure things to get around the process that's already in place. We have a big opportunity in 2024 to pursue some of these ideas. Now, as Spike mentioned, it's very difficult to get people's attention, right? However, if there's any difference between me and Spike, it's that I'm 55 years older, right? What I have been able to observe is that over time, people are getting increasingly disgusted with the federal government and the state government. And increasingly, people are beginning to connect the dots. A lot of our problems are more and more obvious to be related to bad public policy. The inflation that we have today looks a lot like the 1970s, but in the 1970s, we still trusted every government institution. Now, I'm not saying that it's a good thing that we've completely lost faith in every democratic institution in America, right? That's a problem that we need to overcome. Most of the institutions in which we have lost faith, they have earned their way to the loss of faith. So I'm not going to blame that on us. I'm blaming that on them. The fact that our government is going the wrong direction is now increasingly recognized, and bad public policy is increasingly recognized as something that plays a major role in our lives. People are increasingly realizing that inflation is bad public policy, that recessions are exacerbated by bad public policy. And the COVID regime, we have individuals in here who have worked very, very hard on bringing to light important information about how our government failed us in terms of managing our way through COVID. I'm not going to try to add on to that. People will forget that, and in the fullness of time, they will forget more of it and more of it and more of it. So we need to take advantage of it as quickly as possible to remind people that a lot of the things that went wrong and a lot of the things that are continuing to go wrong were because your government had too much power and was not honest with you. But people do recognize this more than ever before. The other reasons it's a big opportunity for us, people aren't happy with their parties. The Republican Party is obviously split. The Democratic Party can't make up its mind whether it wants its incumbent president to run again. Deep, fundamental splits. People are unhappy. People are more open to a third party because of that. It is an opportunity for us, and for lots of other reasons, mostly related to the fact that we no longer have faith in each other. People increasingly recognize that there is a growing wave of authoritarianism in the United States. Where does that come from? Authoritarianism in a democracy comes from someone in power telling you, I need more power to keep someone else out of power, right? It's when a Republican says, you don't have to worry about losing the Constitution so much. What you really need to worry about is a Democrat coming to power. And we see examples of that every day, and people are starting to wake up to those ideas. Both parties openly talk about the other party is in power because the election was stolen, right? Remember, Donald Trump didn't make that up. He may be better at it. He may have leveraged that idea more successfully than others. But Hillary said it before him, and she wasn't the first person to say it. But it's accelerating. And now at the local level, people say that. I ran for Congress last year. The Republican was openly saying he was getting cheated before the election was even done. Like, this is a thing now. Both parties openly talk about manipulating the Supreme Court to their advantage. That wasn't quite as acceptable 20 and 30 years ago as it is today, but now it's a thing. People are starting to recognize that. It's a huge problem for us, but an opportunity for our party. As I see it, here's the problem. Our party is well set up to screw this up again. We have had this opportunity in the past, not as strong as 2024, but we've had opportunities in the past and we failed to take advantage of them. Talk about 2020. If you're on a bus going from town to town in the year 2020, you're not actually running for president. It needs to be spent national advertising to build a brand right away. There's no advantage in flaming out in 16 weeks instead of 16 days. The point and the opportunity of a national campaign is to spread ideas so that the local candidates don't have to do it on their own. Part of the challenge that people like Spike have got to face is a lot of the ideas that we are spreading at the local level. I've run for Congress before. There's no higher calling than running for local office. I thank all of you who are continuing to do it. A lot of the ideas that you spread, that you're selling out there, right? It's the first time people have heard them. The value of the Libertarian Party brand is approximately zero. I would argue the value of the Libertarian brand is negative, that you would get more votes as an independent than as a Libertarian Party member. In some quarters, that's probably true. Hopefully, in some quarters, that's not true. It's the job of the national campaign to build that brand, to push those ideas and to push those ideas aggressively, unapologetically. Not merely to gain votes, although we're going to talk about why that's also the best strategic measure, but to build the party brand. As a strategic measure, messaging has been a problem for our party for a long time. Go back to 2016. What was our big message? And I'll probably get this wrong. I often fumble my way through this. Remember the governor. I'm fiscally conservative like a Republican and socially liberal like a Democrat. I'm sorry. If that's your message, you actually don't have a message. You don't have a strategic vision for how you want to communicate to people. You've just told me that you're a little bit like one of the candidates, a little bit like the other candidate. So maybe if you don't like the Republican, you don't like the Democrat, you can hate me because I'm a little of both, right? It makes no sense. Why are you in the race? With all due respect. And the governor seems like a nice guy, smart guy. People say he was a successful governor and did a lot of great things. This isn't personal. But whoever told him that was a legitimate messaging campaign was lying to him. Why did he get more votes than our other candidates have ever gotten? Because the media accepted him as a credible candidate and was willing to give him a look. The big problem in that campaign was not he forgot, a town in Syria. As horrible a mistake as that may have been, the big problem was that when he made that mistake, there was no crowd behind him cheering him on saying it doesn't matter. Remember, Donald Trump said he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue. I hope that's not true, but he did say, I could probably shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose a significant amount of support. He may be right. Gary Johnson not only could not shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, he couldn't even, forget the name of a town in Syria before we threw him in the water. There was no support behind him because he had no rallying cry. He was not out there pushing our ideas. And why not? He was looking for overlap, right, with the Republican Party, looking for overlap with the Democratic Party. That's not why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. That's not why we're here. Never mind why I'm here. It's not why you're here. By the way, fiscally conservative like a Republican and socially liberal like a Democrat, never mind how silly a strategic maneuver it is. It's not even true. It's not even true. We're not fiscally conservative. Like, first of all, Republicans are no longer fiscally conservative any way, fashion, right? Would a Republican tell you that taking money away from people and spending it on projecting military power around the world is evil? No, they would not. That's for us to tell people. Are we really socially liberal in the same way the Democrats are? We go around canceling people and criticizing people for their First Amendment rights and acting holier than thou. I don't remember libertarians doing that. When libertarians get in trouble for doing dumb things, it's because we're critical of the way the Democratic Party does things, right? That's where we sometimes step in it and say dumb things ourselves. So it's not even true. The recipe for success, we all know what it is. Again, my job is to tell you things you already know. We need to run a campaign that's more professional than in the past, that's more credible. We need to back up our ideas with deep action. And we need to represent our principles and our ideas unapologetically. We need to cleave hard edges against the Republican Party and hard edges against the Democratic Party. It's the only way that this is going to work out. We've already had candidates in this nomination process talk about how we need to stop being so edgy. This was in a Reason interview a few months ago, right? Can't be so edgy. And I'm watching this, and you know, Reason magazine, they're very nice people, and they get you're sort of nodding your head as you watch this, right? Because it seems so reasonable the way they talk. And you're saying, yeah, that makes sense, that makes sense. And all of a sudden it hits you. No, it doesn't. That's not correct. That's not the way to do business. That's not the way to do business on a strategic level. And it's not even an accurate and legitimate representation of who we are. Yes, other parties with us. Pardon? They're big anymore. The big Republican issue is keeping a Democrat out of power, and the big Democratic issue is keeping a Republican out of power. Those are their big issues nowadays. And that's where authoritarianism comes from. That's why we have a huge opportunity, but it does mean that we need to run a professional campaign and to offer credibility to back it up. And it's a different animal than we have been putting out there in the past. This is not per se a pitch, oh, and therefore I should be the nominee. There are other people who could do it too. But it is important that we not run the style that we have in the past. We have to engage the media where they expect us to be. They still expect it to be a competition among individuals who they can imagine could be a credible threat to be in the White House. We're not getting anywhere if we run one who a long commitment to policy and public service, for example, right? Those are just the basic building blocks that people expect. Maybe I wish it weren't true, but no amount of me wishing things were different is going to change them. So we need to give a campaign in the same style the public expects. And that's a lot of hard work.